working from home or working in the office? Since the pandemic, there's been a worldwide debate around the phenomenon.
It's like, really, you're going to work from home and you're going to make everyone else who made your car come work in the factory? You're going to make the people who make your food that gets delivered, that they can't work from home, but you can? Does that seem morally right? The laptop class is living in La La Land.
That's Elon Musk.
It's a productivity issue, but it's also a moral issue. People should get off the goddamn moral high horse with the work from home bullshit.
Why work from home? Some people say it saves money and time.
You've got your fuel and transport costs to get to the office. You then have to pay for parking at the office. It starts to make it a little bit more costly.
But companies aren't so convinced.
After becoming a remote working pioneer, Telco One NZ now wants some of its employees to spend more time in the office.
Maybe there's a middle ground.
Earlier this week, the breakfast inbox exploded after I suggested the golden era of working from home should come to an end, because people were taking the mickey out of it and productivity was down. Well, interesting timing, because new research shows more of us are switching to hybrid work models. Now that's a mix of in-office and remote work. As for productivity, the majority of hybrid workers, well, they say they're more productive at home.
Kia ora, I'm Tom Kitchen, and today on The Detail, is the work from home revolution still alive, or has it reached a standstill? I was just imagining myself working from home, being a podcast host. It'd be pretty hard work. I wouldn't have the soundproof walls. I mean, I have tried working from home before and it's been very hard. And I'd probably be distracted by doing the washing, and might watch an episode of TV at lunchtime, I'd imagine.
I was going to say, and especially for a podcaster like you, right, as the cat comes walking in or the dog, and you're like, no, not now.
Yeah,
not
exactly.
now, I'm working. Jeez.
Or the next door neighbour starts up the mower. That's happened to me before. I'm talking here to Jared Ha about what it's like to work from home. He's a professor of management and Māori business at Massey University.
I've had the few Zoom meetings, and of course it's baking hot and you're having to shut every window and even kind of turn the fan down because it's too noisy, and you're just like, oh my gosh, I can't wait for this meeting to finish so I can get out and get some fresh air. But
Yeah. I wouldn't have the collegial environment of the excellent Detail team. Shout out to you there. Thank you so much for joining us on The Detail today, Jared. What I want to talk to you about is the study that you do every few months. Is it the Wellbeing at Work study?
Yeah, so usually twice a year. To be honest, I stumbled into it by accident because I was collecting data pre-COVID, like February 2020, and then by March, April, we were in lockdown, and I was like, I've collected this data, but I wonder how much things have changed already. So I then did my kind of first Wellbeing at Work study in May 2020. So it's just kind of building, understanding around some of the dynamics, and one of those has been, in particular, hybrid work, and in particular, working 5 days a week at home, which I'm sure it occurred, but pre-COVID, I doubt we would have ever asked that question, because everybody would have thought that's kind of impossible. And now here we are. Now we've got kind of consistent numbers around 5 days at home, and that's gone from 8% in June last year to about 6% in December, but the hybrid working has kind of exploded back up again to just under 42%.
42%.
So we've got roughly half the workforce in the office permanently, but the other half in some kind of hybrid mix with a small but still quite chunky number only ever working from home, which in all honesty does kind of blow my mind, because we've never really seen this before.
We'll come back to Jared a bit later, but now let's go to Chris Keel, technology editor for the New Zealand Herald. He's written a lot about this topic.
I think what we've seen just over the past 6 months, and even in the new year with a couple of flashpoints, we've seen a lot of big organisations move from sort of carte blanche during the pandemic, work from home, especially for white-collar workers, blue-collar workers, small businesses, never was a thing. But a lot of organisations with a lot of white-collar workers are now saying, you've been working from home 5 days a week or 2 days a week, and that the new normal actually looks a lot more like the old normal. So a lot of organisations are saying we now want you in the office at least 3 days a week.
So what's been the reaction to that from employees?
I think it's mirrored the situation in the US where there's been a degree of pushback. Shortly before Christmas, a dispute developed at 1NZ, which is still ongoing.
Some contact centre workers at 1NZ, formerly Vodafone, are fighting against changes that would make them work from the office 3 times a week, an increase of a day from their previous arrangement.
They were one of the first companies to send all their staff home even before the first level 4 lockdown. And they said they're going to be a big champion of remote working ongoing. And they say they still are, but before Christmas, most of their teams, they said, hey, we want you back in the office at least 3 days a week. And one of those teams, which is the most heavily unionised one, the call centre workers, about 112 of their 2,500 staff said, we don't want to, and Unite Union talked about the various benefits of working from home, the arguments we're now quite familiar with.
We've got transport costs, we've got emissions, it's people's time spent on the roads.
1NZ said, hey, we agree with all of that, but our managers have found, this is not just call centres but across the whole organisation, they said
the change from 2 days in the office to 3 is best for supporting customer outcomes and developing team culture.
The unionised staff said, no, we're going to protest and we're actually going to work from home in the new year as a protest, which could still lead to industrial action. And 1NZ said that's not going to impact the customer experience. And the union's like, well, if it's not impacting customer experience, could it be the way? But 1NZ still said, it's going to benefit people overall to spend at least 3 days a week in the office.
Chris has also spoken to Kirk Hope, the CEO of lobby group Business NZ.
What he's seen is a lot of his members wanting to dial working from home down to 3 days, 2 days, 1 day, or even 0 days, as he put it. And he said a lot of the big organisations now, they still want flexibility if you have to drop off your kids or whatever, but a lot of them are favouring glide time. So they're saying, come into the office at 10 and leave at 6 and address the flexibility that way rather than working from home.
Yeah, how does that work? Glide time? Yeah, just explain. So you can kind of start when you want, finish when you want.
Yeah. You can do your hours when you want, but they all have to be from the office. And he said there's a big burst of popularity for that. And we've also, last year we saw in the US companies like Amazon or Meta saying, we want staff back into the office, even Zoom, of course, the poster boy for, well, we all know why this one's ironic, right?
Yeah.
Everything I know about irony I learned from Alanis Morissette. So I'm not sure if this is irony or if this is some other word. Now, Zoom, we've learned, is requiring that its employees return to the office at least 2 days a week. So is that if they live within about 50 miles of an office, they're expected to come in and use their punch card and sit down at their desk.
They've been trying to nudge people back into the office for sort of 18 months, 2 years, and the difference we saw in the last few months of 2023 was companies beginning to introduce sanctions. With Amazon, the reports said you could even potentially lose your job if you refuse to come back into the office.
Oof. Many employees have been pushing back as Amazon now requires they return to their desks at least 3 days per week. Well, in an internal Q&A this month, CEO Andy Jassy told employees, quote, if you can't disagree and commit, it's probably not going to work out for you at Amazon.
Across the Tasman, we had ANZ Bank, according to the Financial Workers Union, say, we want you back in the office about 50% of your week. And if you don't do that, then your bonus could be trimmed.
Bank execs have told staff they believe the move strikes a balance between offering staff flexibility and promoting in-person collaboration.
I asked ANZ New Zealand if they were following that policy, and they just addressed it in broad terms and said all of all of an employee's performance objectives would factor into their bonus.
Not answer.
Yeah.
Okay. You've also talked to some other companies in New Zealand about what they're doing, right? Other big, financial companies and the like. What have they told you?
The norm is very much moving back from 3 days at home to 2 days at home. This is talking to the telcos, banks, insurance companies, and so forth. We've even seen in the public sector a degree of pressure to move back into the office.
Okay, so a real move to a hybrid format rather than a completely working from home or completely working from the office.
Yeah, and also the emergence of glide time and also closer monitoring in the UK. EY, one of the big accounting firms, got a lot of coverage when it introduced what the medical turnstile monitoring to see how much time staff were actually spending in the office. EY New Zealand here said they had always monitored swipe card access, but they weren't mandating a specific amount of time in the office.
Did you call it turnstile monitoring?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
So we've got some organisations here, like we asked MB, how much time do your staff spend in the office? And they said, well, we don't know because we don't collect that data. But a lot of the big commercial organisations now are starting to look at that swipe card data. So is Chris actually spending 50% of his time in the office? And some of them, if you're not, they're saying, well, that could factor into your remuneration. Mm-hmm. And we've seen some evidence now in the UK that the Bank of England got together with several large universities and they analysed various pieces of work that were surveying some 2,500 companies, and they found that if you worked from home, then you were slightly less likely to get a pay rise. And a separate survey by a company in the US looking at data from some 2 million white-collar employees, they said that if you worked from home, you were 35% more likely to lose your job if your company had a round of layoffs.
So that sounds bad, right? But is it really because employees who work from home don't work as hard? Back to Jared Haar from Massey University and his employment survey. It's found some interesting results, like people saying they're more productive when they work from home.
The majority are usually at least the same level of productivity, but as of December 2023, we've got 51% saying, "Oh, I'm more productive." And I think that really just captures the fact that I don't have to wake up, have a shower, have a shave, put a suit on, drive for an hour into the city. I could get a coffee and turn on my laptop and start working straight away. So you're probably more likely to start more productive, and you're less likely to be distracted and things like that. So you don't go into the workplace and the first thing you do is have a colleague say, "Oh, let's go get a coffee," and you're off talking about.
Yeah, I think the conversation when I came into the office this morning was all about the weather and why we had such torrential rain after days and days of sun. So yes, I understand what you mean. You do lose a bit of productivity, but it's nice to have that social connection, isn't it?
Well, and I totally agree. And early on, I did find those all home workers had higher loneliness. So there was a real downside to that. But interestingly enough, in the last year, that's kind of disappeared.
Why?
I think what we're finding is those people working from home consistently, and we have kind of gone about 8 to 7% in 2022, 8% June 23 to 6%. I think you're finding some people are probably putting their hand up and saying, actually, not enjoying being at home all the time. I want to come into the office a bit, so they turn into hybrid. And I think other workers are now just working those dynamics better, and I've encouraged people, for example, to, even if it's not work colleagues, catch up with friends and family for lunch during your work day, just to kind of get you out of the house, break things up. Because we are social animals. We want to connect with people in a physical place rather than, when people say, "Oh, would you like to do a virtual coffee?" I always kind of laugh at that and think, no, not really. I'd rather have a real coffee because that's just my preference. And I think a lot of people are like that.
And it's not just workers' perceptions of their own productivity.
The other bit of data I have some separate, what we call citizenship behaviours, which is how much you help your colleagues, how much you defend the organisation and represent, after hours, for example, when you might otherwise think, oh gosh, I don't have to do this, but I will. And what I do find is that those hybrid workers engage in those kind of behaviours, including innovation behaviours, more than office workers. So there is this kind of independent data saying that, if somebody said to me, I don't like hybrid workers, they don't work the same. I'd be saying, well, actually, the data does tell a different story than that. And I think, a lot of the return to office kind of mandates we're seeing out of the States, there's already research coming out saying those companies tend to be performing poorly. And so it's more a kind of knee-jerk reaction to, financial difficulties in the firm. And even like 6 months later, they've been able to track and say, well, actually, these firms haven't got any better, even though everybody's now back in the office. So kind of reminding those CEOs that, it wasn't the working from home that was disrupting your business. It was some other fundamental. There's a lot of managers, I think, who still struggle with the whole working from home. And they, and to me, it's really about trust. And I say to them, I said, set your productivity expectations. If they're not being met, you might say to the person, hey, I need you back in the office because I need to keep an eye on you, or you're not doing what I've asked. But if they are, then, they've really done what you're expecting. And I like to remind managers that if you think Jared's a slack, lazy person at home, he's going to be equally slack and lazy in the office. I might be the social butterfly who talks to everybody, coffees all the time. And then you go, but Jared never does any work. Being in the office isn't the kind of remedy. It's really is a productivity or a performance issue, and managers just need to kind of step up and try to manage those poor performers better. And I think that's fine to say, actually, less hybrid work for you. I want you in here. But again, it's going to take a hands-on approach, it's not like a magic wand. Oh, Jared's in the office. Now he will become a good worker. Probably not.
But there are still ways with technology these days that you can monitor when people are online at home and the work they're doing and when they start and leave. But you don't want to become one of those managerial stalkers, do you?
No, and there is evidence showing that kind of surveillance stuff does two things. One is it's a total trust killer. So workers just like, stuff you then. And so, come 5 o'clock when you're, at 4:58 when you're emailing somebody, oh, I need you to do this. They'll say, no, stuff you because, you don't trust me. And this is how I'll reciprocate. But there's also been this proliferation of kind of anti-surveillance software. So I can download or buy a mouse and it'll automatically every 30 seconds jiggle itself and click a few things. It doesn't do anything on your monitor per se, but on the counter, the surveillance technology, it says, oh, Jared moves his mouse every 20 to 30 seconds. Oh, every hour of the day. What a good worker he is. And of course, I could be sitting in a chair watching Netflix.
Do you feel that there's also a change in offices as well, and the look of offices and the amount of space in offices? It seems like there's a lot more people, a lot more staff than desks in the office. We've seen that change come over time with hot desking. What do you think about that move?
So a colleague of mine and me as well have done research around that and saying usually hot desking is kind of the worst of all options because people just totally get, the failure to make any connection with place. And if I like working next to you and tomorrow when I come into the office, I'm the floor down, that's not going to get the best out of me. So I guess I would suggest the data isn't a big fan of hot desking. I think having, 500 employees and having 300 desks is the new reality because I think a lot of companies are now realizing that, gee whiz, hybrid's probably here to stay. Let's not spend all of our money on this whole kind of, 550 offices for 550 workers type thing, because it's not actually that efficient.
But working from home isn't good for everyone. Chris Keel from the Herald again.
The research coming out of the UK is that, and the US, is that those entering the workforce are often disadvantaged. They're worried about whether they'll develop skills and just, basic office politics skills as well as technical skills and career progression. So I think it's a lot harder if you're entering the workforce for the first time. One solution that's been put forward if you do have a lot of people working from home at different times is to have multiple mentors for a younger staffer, and that's something that I've seen work quite well as well. And another solution too is for new staff that they've got to work in the office for the first 3 or 6 months.
Can I just ask, some people, Jared, might listen to this podcast and think, oh, look, people are just saying they're more productive at home because they just want to stay in bed and stay comfy, and people might question people being more productive at home. Well, what do you have to say to people that think that?
Yeah, well, I guess I do have this kind of other performance data, which is definitely linked to firm performance, and that does show that hybrid work, it's actually the hybrid workers, the all home and all office are different. They're less productive than hybrid workers, interestingly enough. But again, all I would say to that is, if you think I'm lying in bed, sleeping in, watching Netflix, put a camera on me for the day in the office and you'll say, I noticed Jared had an hour and a half for lunch and he's had 3 coffee breaks for half an hour. Oh, that guy doesn't do any work in the office either. So I think, the reality is, and maybe this is a good, future focus for organisations, focus on that productivity.
That's it for today. Thanks to our guests Jared Ha and Chris Keel. The Detail is punted through RNZ and NZ On Air. Today's episode was engineered by Jeremy Ansell. It was produced by Gwen McClure and Alexia Russell. I'm Tom Kitchen. Hey, Kona.